Hey everyone. Occasionally I have to make small adjustments to keep everything YouTube friendly. That means certain extreme details may be toned down or slightly changed, but the core of each story always stays true to the original experience. Appreciate you being here and let's get into it. I'm old, but when this happened, I was 38. I'd already been on the job a little over a decade, mostly night shifts by that point because it worked better with my life. My wife worked mornings and we had a daughter who was 7 then, so I handled evenings, dinner, homework, getting her to bed, and then I'd head out. It wasn't some heroic thing, just what made sense for us. Night patrol gets this reputation like it's constant action, but most of it is just driving. Empty roads, checking businesses, the same radio chatter looping in the background. You get used to the quiet. After a while, you kind of rely on it. That night, I almost swapped shifts with another guy. He had something going on with his kid, but I ended up keeping mine. It was somewhere past 1 a.m. I don't remember the exact time without looking at the report, but it was deep enough into the shift that everything had settled. I was on a stretch of road that cuts through a wooded area. 2-lane, no streetlights for long sections, just reflectors and trees on both sides. People use it as a shortcut during the day, but at night it's basically empty. I saw headlights in the distance. It stood out right away. A car coming toward me. It drifted slightly over the center line, then corrected. Enough that you notice if you've been doing this long enough. Then it did it again. Maybe the driver was tired, or on their phone, or drunk, obviously. That's always the first thing you consider. I slowed a bit, watching as it passed me. As it did, I glanced over like I always do. I didn't get a clear look at the driver, just a shape. Maybe someone leaning forward a little too much. I checked my mirror and saw it drift again, this time toward the shoulder. I turned around, flipped my lights on, and started closing the distance. The car didn't immediately react. Some people take a second to process what's happening, especially on a dark road like that. But then it did something I didn't like. It sped up. I could see the rear end dip slightly, like the driver had pressed down harder. I remember saying something out loud, just to myself, like, come on, don't do this, because it turns a simple stop into something else entirely. I hit the radio, gave dispatch the plate as I got close enough to read it, and let them know I was attempting a stop and the vehicle wasn't yielding. At that point, I did activate the siren. The car took off, not like in movies, but definitely not stopping. It stayed in its lane mostly, which was the strange part. Usually when people run, they're erratic. This was controlled. Too controlled almost, just accelerating steadily down this empty road. I kept up. It wasn't hard, we weren't in a high-speed pursuit, but still dangerous, especially with the trees and no lighting, but manageable. The whole time, I kept expecting it to turn off somewhere. There are a couple side roads out there, gravel paths, things like that, but it didn't. It just kept going straight. Then after a minute, it slowed down, and then it pulled to the side of the road. The way it just stopped, like nothing had happened, like the whole thing was over. I pulled in behind it, angled the cruiser slightly like we're trained to, lights still flashing. The road was completely empty, no other cars. I remember taking a second before getting out. That's normal. You observe, watch for movement, anything unusual. And there was something off, but I couldn't place it yet. The car was still running. I could see the exhaust faintly in the rear lights. But there was no movement inside, no silhouette shifting, no head turning. I opened my door, stepped out, approached on the driver's side, staying slightly behind the door frame like we're taught. As I got closer, I angled my flashlight toward the interior. The driver's seat was empty. My brain kind of stalled on it, like it was trying to correct what I was seeing. I took another step forward, leaned slightly, and shined the light directly inside. Empty. The car was still in drive. Well, actually, I think it was in park by then, but the engine was definitely running. Door closed, windows up, no one in the driver's seat. I remember saying, "What the hell?" under my breath. Then I moved the light toward the back seat, and that's when everything shifted. There was blood, not a small amount, not something you'd question. It was across the back seat, looked fresh, or at least not old. The seats themselves had cuts in them, long, Jagged slashes, like someone had taken a knife and dragged it across the material repeatedly. The foam underneath was exposed in places. There were also marks on the interior panels, near the door, even on the back of the front passenger seat. Not random scratches, but deliberate cuts. There was no damage to the outside of the car, nothing that suggested a crash or impact. Just that inside. I called it in immediately, requested backup, and gave a quick description. It didn't make sense for the driver to just be gone. As soon as I opened it, the smell, unmistakable. I scanned the back seat more carefully. There was hair strands caught in the torn fabric. Long, dark hair. Several strands, not just one or two. It belonged to a woman, just based on the length. That was my first assumption. Another type of hair, I guess. Lighter, maybe brown, or even kind of reddish under the flashlight. Also long, but slightly different texture. It just felt like another detail in a situation that already didn't make sense. Backup arrived, we secured the scene, shut off the vehicle, and started going through the standard process. Checking the surrounding area, shining lights into the tree line, calling out in case someone had fled on foot. There was nothing. No footprints that we could clearly identify in the dark. No signs of someone crashing through the woods. Just the car, sitting there like it had been placed. When we ran the plate, it came back as stolen. Reported earlier by a woman from a nearby town. She had called it in herself, said her car was gone from her driveway. At that point, it started to take a more defined shape in our heads. Stolen vehicle, something bad, driver fled into the woods. But it didn't line up cleanly. The way the car had been driven didn't match someone panicking or trying to escape after something like that. And the empty driver's seat. I still couldn't reconcile that. Over the next few hours, the area was searched more thoroughly once we had better lighting. Still nothing. No clear direction of travel. Just the car. The woman who reported it stolen was brought in the next day. That was handled by detectives. But I was around when some of the initial information came through. She was in her late 20s, lived alone, no immediate family nearby. From what I heard, she seemed genuinely confused and scared. Said she parked the car that evening, went inside, and when she came back out later, it was gone. No signs of forced entry at her place, no witnesses. Then she went missing. That's when the whole thing shifted again. At first it seemed like maybe she had been involved somehow, maybe lying about the theft, maybe connected to whatever happened in that car. But then the lab results came back. The blood in the back seat didn't match her. Not even close. Different person entirely. I remember being in the room when that was said. There was this pause, like everyone expected a follow-up that would make it make sense. There wasn't one. The hair, though, that was hers, at least some of it. The darker strands matched her DNA. But the other hair, the lighter one, didn't match anyone in the system. Unknown. So now we had a stolen car, reported by a woman who was now missing. Her hair found in the back seat of that car, along with a significant amount of blood that didn't belong to her, and another person's hair that we couldn't identify. And no driver, no suspect, no explanation for how the car ended up where it did. I kept thinking about how quickly everything had happened. The car in front of me, the way it drove, the way it stopped. When I first pulled up behind the car before I got out, I remember looking at the rear window. I thought I saw movement inside. Not in the driver's seat, more like in the back. But when I got closer and shined the light, there was nothing. Just the blood, the torn seats, the hair. I've gone back and forth on that a lot. Could have been a reflection. The lights, the trees, my own headlights bouncing off the glass. That's the reasonable explanation. The case, no matches on the unknown DNA, no confirmed sightings of the missing woman after that night, no new evidence from the car. It's been years. Most of the guys I worked with back then have moved on or transferred, and it just became one of those stories. I'm Amber. I was in my late 20s and traveling alone more often. I had just started working remotely, which meant I could stay pretty much anywhere as long as there was decent internet. I'd spent most of my early 20s in busy cities, shared apartments, constant noise, always around people. It got exhausting in a way I didn't fully notice until I stepped away from it. So I started booking rural Airbnbs, places that were a bit isolated, somewhere I could work during the day and just exist in silence at night. The place this happened in was somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I won't say where, but it was a few hours' drive from the nearest proper city. The listing described it as a private countryside cabin, and that was accurate. The host seemed normal. He had good reviews, nothing that stood out as weird. In his messages, he mentioned he lived about an hour away and only came by occasionally if something needed fixing. I arrived in the afternoon. The drive itself took longer than I expected because the last stretch of road wasn't paved and I had to go pretty slow. I was thinking halfway there that if something went wrong out here, I'd probably be on my own for a while. But once I got there, it felt peaceful. The cabin looked exactly like the photos. There was nothing unusual about it. A small gravel area to park, a wooden porch, a couple of outdoor chairs that looked like they hadn't been used in a while. Inside was clean, simple. A bed, a couch, a small table. It had that slightly musty smell older places get, but nothing concerning. I unpacked a bit, set up my laptop, and settled in. The first day and night I worked, made some food. There was no cell signal inside the cabin, but the Wi-Fi worked well enough for what I needed. The second day was the same. I remember thinking I'd probably extend my stay. It wasn't until the second night that things started to feel off, and even then it was subtle enough that I almost ignored it. I had gone to bed a bit earlier. It must have been around 10 or so. I woke up at some point in the night and noticed a faint light coming through the window. The cabin didn't have any nearby street lights or anything like that, so any light outside stood out. I got up and walked over to the window. There was a car parked outside. The headlights were off, but the interior light was faintly on. It took me a second to process that it hadn't just pulled in, it was already there. It didn't immediately alarm me. The road leading to the cabin wasn't exactly well marked. But there wasn't really a reason for anyone to come all the way down that road unless they were specifically going to the cabin. It wasn't a pass-through kind of place. I couldn't see anyone inside the car from where I was. Then it clicked that it might be the host. That explanation felt reasonable enough at the time. Maybe he needed to check something. It was strange that he hadn't said anything beforehand. I didn't go outside. I didn't feel unsafe yet, just unsure. I figured if it was him, he'd knock or message me. Eventually, I went back to bed. I remember telling myself I'd deal with it in the morning. When I woke up, the car was gone. I checked my phone, no messages. That should have been the point where I left, but it wasn't. Looking back, I think I was still trying to rationalize everything. Nothing had actually happened. A car had been there. That was it. The rest of that day went by normally, but the thought stayed in the back of my mind. That evening, I was more aware of everything. Every sound felt a little sharper. I locked the doors earlier than I had the previous nights, something I hadn't really been careful about before. Around 9 or so, I heard a car again. This time I was fully awake. I went straight to the window and looked out. It was the same car. There was no doubt in my mind about that. Same shape, same color. Parked in almost the exact same spot. I grabbed my phone and checked the Airbnb listing again, just to confirm what I already remembered. The host lived over an hour away. That's what he had told me, which made it hard to explain why his car, if it was his, was there again unannounced in the middle of the night. There was a knock on the door. I walked over, stopping a few feet away from the door. "Hello," I called out. "It's me," a man's voice said from outside. The owner. It was just too casual for the situation. I opened the door, but only slightly, keeping the chain latch on. He was standing there. "Sorry to come this late," he said. "I just needed a bit of help with something outside. Won't take long." The request itself wasn't that strange on paper, but the timing, the way he showed up without warning, the car being there the night before, it all stacked in a way that made me hesitate. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Just moving something from the car. It's a bit heavy." I was just standing there, trying to decide what to do. Part of me didn't want to be rude. Another part of me didn't want to step outside. "I can come take a look," I said finally, not fully committing. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping some distance between us. He turned and walked toward the car. I followed, but slowly. As I got closer, I found myself looking through the window into the back seat. There was a lot of stuff back there. Way more than you'd expect someone to casually carry around. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. It just looked like a pile of equipment. Then certain details started to stand out. Metal trays, tools that looked like surgical instruments, things that were individually wrapped. And there were knives, the kind that are thin, precise, designed for cutting in a very controlled way. It didn't make sense. I was leaning slightly closer to the window, trying to convince myself I was misinterpreting it, that there was some normal explanation I just wasn't seeing. There was too much of it, too organized in a way that didn't fit any harmless scenario I could think of. I stepped back. "What exactly do you need help with?" I asked again. He turned toward me. He didn't answer, just looked at me. That was enough. Something in my head just clicked into place, and I stopped trying to be polite. "I'm actually really tired," I said quickly. "I think I'm just going to head back inside." I didn't wait for a response. I just walked back to the cabin. As soon as I got inside, I shut the door and locked it. Then I stood there. I heard footsteps on the porch. The door handle moved, slowly, then more forcefully. And then, a sound I wasn't expecting, the distinct click of a key. The door unlocked. I didn't even have time to process how he had another key before the door started to open. I pushed against it instinctively, slamming it shut and locking it again, my hands shaking. "Hey," he said from the other side, his tone completely different now. "Just open the door." I backed away, looking around for something, anything, I could use to block it. There was a chair near the table. I grabbed it and wedged it under the handle. The door rattled again, and there was silence. I thought he had left, but I heard something near the side of the cabin. There was another door. I had barely paid attention to it before. It led into the kitchen area. I ran toward the bedroom and shut that door, dragging a small dresser in front of it. My phone was in my hand by then. I was already dialing emergency services. I heard something else, a hissing sound. Then a smell started to seep into the room. Chemical. I moved further back, covering my mouth with my sleeve. The bedroom door handle moved. "Open it," he said. I didn't. I just kept talking to the operator, giving them the location as clearly as I could. At some point, I told him I had called the police. I don't remember exactly how I said it, just that I said it. A few minutes later, I heard a car engine start, and then later, police arrived. They checked the area. The car was nowhere to be found. They tried to contact him using the information from the listing, but nothing led anywhere useful. Eventually, they went to the address associated with him. It was empty. Not just empty, like someone had moved out recently. It looked like no one had been living there for a while. No neighbors had seen him. No one could give any clear information about him beyond what was already on the platform. I didn't stay there again after that night. For a while, I tried to make sense of it in a practical way. Maybe he had some kind of medical background. He had something that he was clearly trying to spray into the room. The truth is, whatever he was doing, it wasn't something that started that night. I don't think I was the first person he tried that with. I'm in my mid-40s, and I've moved around a lot since this happened, but I was 32 and living alone in a town, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Tessa. The house I rented was older. It had this worn, lived-in feel, things like that, but it was clean and the landlord kept it in good shape. My bedroom was at the back of the house, facing a patch of trees that led into a larger wooded area. There was a narrow backyard, then a short fence, and beyond that it sloped into brush and trees. One day, I woke up early, like I usually did, and when I sat up in bed, I saw that the window above the dresser was cracked open by an inch. I was careful about locking up at night, but I figured I must have opened it before bed and just forgot. You go through your routine half asleep and miss a step. So I got up, pushed it closed, made sure the latch clicked, and went about my day. A couple nights later, it happened again. This time I woke up halfway through the night, pulled the blanket closer, and saw the curtain shifting slightly. When I looked closer, the window was open again, about the same amount as before. That gave me pause. I must be doing this without realizing it, maybe opening it earlier in the evening and forgetting to shut it. I got up, closed it again, checked the latch, and even gave it a small push to make sure it was secure. It didn't move. After that, every night before bed, I'd go around the house and check everything. Front door, back door, windows. I'd physically touch each one, not just glance at them. It became a small habit. And one night, I woke up suddenly. I was lying on my side, facing the window, and the curtain shifted, but not from wind. It was more controlled, like it was being pushed aside. My eyes adjusted, and I saw the window open again, wider, and something just beyond it. I saw a hand. It came from outside, pale in the dark, fingers wrapping around the edge of the window frame. Slowly, very deliberately, it pulled the window down. Careful movement until the window was fully shut. As soon as the window clicked into place, the hand disappeared. That's when it hit me all at once. I sat up and screamed. It was a raw reaction. I scrambled backward on the bed. I don't remember getting out of bed. The next clear moment I have is standing in the hallway with all the lights on. I checked every room. When I went back into the bedroom, the window was closed. The latch was in place. There wasn't anything to make sense of. No sound of someone running off, nothing. That was the first time I felt genuinely afraid in that house. I called the police that night. They came out. I tried to explain what I'd seen. It sounded strange, even to them. They checked the perimeter. After that, I was more on edge. I kept my phone close. Time passed, and one day, I came home one afternoon and found the back door open. It was wide open, not just unlocked. I stood there debating whether to go inside or call someone. Eventually, I stepped in slowly. Something felt off. I walked through each room carefully until I got to my bedroom. The door was open. I was sure I'd left it closed. On the bed, right in the center, was something I had never seen before. It looked like a doll. It was small, maybe the size of my forearm, and it looked like it had been handmade or altered. Parts of it were burned or melted, the surface uneven and dark. There was red paint smeared across it in rough streaks, and the face, or what was supposed to be a face, was distorted, like it had been damaged on purpose. It didn't look like something that had ended up there by accident. It looked placed, or thrown. I didn't touch it. I didn't go any closer than the doorway. I backed out and called the police again. They came fairly quickly this time. Different officers, same process. They looked around. They asked if I had any issues with neighbors, anyone who might want to scare me or get into the house. And there was one person I mentioned. About a 10-minute drive from my place, deeper into the wooded area, there was a man who lived in a house that people in town talked about occasionally. Just rumors. People said he kept to himself, acted strangely, sometimes wandered near other properties without much reason. I had seen him once or twice, near the trees. The officers took note of it and said they'd check it out. Later, they had gone to the house, but the man wasn't there. According to a neighbor, he had left a few days earlier to stay with his sister in another town. There was no immediate reason to connect him to what happened, and without evidence, they couldn't do much. That didn't make me feel any better. After that, I stayed with a friend for a couple nights. When I came back, avoided being in the house alone after dark if I could help it. About a week passed with nothing happening. I started to relax, at least a little. Then one night, I woke up again. This time, it was a physical sensation, something on my leg. At first, in that half-asleep state, I thought it might be a blanket shifting or my own movement. It was pressure, like fingers lightly touching just above my ankle. My eyes opened slowly. There was someone at the side of my bed. A man, crouched low. He was looking down at my leg, his hand still resting there. I just screamed. He reacted, pulling back and standing up in one motion. I saw him turn and run, heading out of the room. I scrambled out of bed, shaking, barely able to think, and grabbed my phone. I called the police again. I told them everything I saw, described the man as best as I could. It matched, loosely, the man I had mentioned before. They checked his house again. This time, they told me he wasn't there, and hadn't been for some time. According to what they could gather, no one had seen him return. In fact, there was some concern that he might be missing. That's the part that never made sense to me, because someone had been in my house. After that night, I didn't stay there again. I packed what I could during the day, had friends come over so I wasn't alone, and made arrangements to leave. A few months later, I ended up moving to Japan for work-related reasons that had already been in motion before all of this happened. The situation with the house just made the decision easier. I didn't want to stay there anymore. The last thing I heard about the man was that he was eventually seen back at his house. Someone reported seeing him there, lights on, moving around inside. But when authorities looked into it, there wasn't enough to confirm anything clearly. No solid evidence tying him to what happened to me, no explanation for where he had been, and no answers about how he could have been there and not there at the same time. I never went back to find out more.